So I'm a TV news anchor with African News, and you may have seen this, but something a little different. I come from a family of educators, and my parents ran a school where they oversaw the education of, several children across the local community where we lived at the time. And now there was a problem at some point. The school ceased operation, and many children did not have access to learning, and the teachers did not have, they became jobless. And so the solution was either to take the children to distant communities where they could have access to other schools, or take children, enroll children in a public school where it was really overcrowded, and people had lost faith in that public school. But my parents did not, do any of this. They decided to do something different. So they turned our living quarters into a school for children, because they thought that they wouldn't go to the distant communities, and then they wouldn't also go to the public school. So teachers they had jobs again, and a lot of kids ended up in our house. Where they were being taught how to, taught many things. So the house literally became a house of cards. Every time I returned from school, everything became improvised, to cater for learning, to become a classroom for them. Now, this was, in my estimation, my first experience of access to learning, or a solution to access to learning, which I think at the time, 20 years ago, or 25 years ago, thereabout, was some form of EdTech. Now, then, there was poor electricity. There was lack of access to education for many children across my country, Nigeria then, and indeed for many parts on the continent. And also, there was no internet access. Today, many things have changed. A lot of improvements, a lot of advancements in technology have taken place. So, and education, EdTech is the junction where education meets with technology. Going by all of what we see today, and some of the things that we saw previously, 20 years ago, where there was a lot of difficulties. Now, there have been significant progress made across the continent. Access to learning has increased. Maybe we still have some little problems, more like electricity, but then with the significant progress made, can we really say that Africa, has arrived? Can we really say that, education on the continent is now adequate for children and for the graduates who are churning out in the 21st century world? Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to declare this panel session open now. And joining me on the panel session, we have one speaker already seated. And she's an amazing woman, Toyosi. I just want to make sure. Toyosi Akerele Ogunsiji, the founder of PassNowNow.com, Rise Networks, a social entrepreneur who Forbes has once named as one of the 20 most powerful young women on the continent. Let's please give a rousing welcome to her, please. Also on this panel is Elvis Chidera, a software engineer at Karim. Elvis is a software engineer at Karim, and Karim is the leading ride-sharing platform in the MENA region, the Middle East and North Africa region. He built GetPrepUp.com, which helps 120,000 high school students in Nigeria prepare for common exams written in West Africa. Elvis, please, you can come join us on the panel. A round of applause for him, please. And you can see here. And Brian Schroeder, the author of Physical Science, General Science and Technology, textbooks, and he has over 35 years, a period of 35 years, contributed into books and journals across South Africa. He sits on several education management boards across Western Cape Education Department, Cape Town, South Africa. Brian, my pleasure. Please join us on the stage. Thank you. So, just as I was saying, today the challenges still remain: electricity, out of school children, girl child education. The beautiful thing, we're in this 21st century with great advances, And the clear reality in the current times is that the knowledge-based approach of 20 to 30 years ago or to 40 years ago would fail our kids in the future workplace, from the little boy in the rural villages of Kenya to the little girl in South Africa, whose government in 2017 funded the delivery of tablets and broadband access to schools, but around 28% of its public schools actually use computers. EdTech is the junction where education meets with technology and can be a great equalizer in improving quality education across Africa. But the question is, so can Africa, going by its peculiar challenges, leapfrog EdTech revolution? In my mind, we have a fantastic panel here comprising of an engineer, comprising of a social entrepreneur, and also we have someone who we can describe as a figure for management, or an administrator on the company. So let us start this panel session with you, Brian, first. I would like to start with you. How would you describe your work in Western Cape first, and in South Africa as a whole, when we look at education technology?
Well, first of all, I'm the head of education in the Western Cape province of South Africa, and part of the national endeavor in improving education in the country. The answer to your question is, can Africa leapfrog, is definitely yes. And I think there are a number of things I'd like to just share with you very briefly. And that's just the vision of education in the Western Cape. And we build it on values. And we think that's quite fundamental to be able to drive education going forward. Now, a bit of background quickly. We've got a number of learners, and I'll tell you how many in a minute. But the challenges we face is drugs, HIV/AIDS, poverty, gangsterism, violence, parental support that's concerning and not really supporting education wholly. You don't need to see all of that. Don't worry about it. You're welcome to see it.
Okay.
Fetal alcohol syndrome because of alcohol abuse and overcrowding. These are challenges that kids face, and I'm sure across Africa, many of these are faced also across the world. In the Western Cape province alone, and that's South Africa that you see there, the red one is Western Cape, 1.1 million learners, 33,000 teachers, 1,500 schools, 52,000 learners who have to be transported to school every day, just in the one province, 471,000 learners on our feeding scheme, indicates the poverty differential that we have. Now, you asked what I do. This is some of the success that we've had over the past. Our schools are divided into 5 quintiles. Quintile 5 is the kind of least poor or affluent, and 1 is the poorest grouping of schools. And if you take a look at the performance in our province over the years, you'll see the top part of that has been the increase in learner performance. So since 2009 to 2018, they've improved. If you take a look at that, you'll see...
That's a period of about 10 years? It's 11 years period.
I count 9 years approximately. You can call it 10 if you want to, but
okay.
It's roughly about 9 space. So it's just under a decade. And if you take a look at that performance, you'll see that the poorest groupings, quintile 1, 2, and 3 on the right there, they have improved the most. You'll say, yeah, base was low, and therefore they improved. But we've achieved significant success. However, even after that 10 years, you will see that differential gap which exists. That is what we consider to be the inequality gap. That we have to change. Despite all our efforts, the performance of poor have increased, but the performance of the affluent has also increased, and we've narrowed the gap, but there's still a huge amount of work that we have to do in our province.
Yeah, if I may just take it from there. I mean, you say there's, apparently from the stats that we've seen, there's a whole lot of work that's going on that you're doing, and also that there's still huge, there are a lot more to be done.
Indeed.
But let me just bring you in now, Toyosi. Toyosi, your work cuts across youth and children, girls and women, and I have seen some of your work. Now, I was checking your website that you built, passnownow.com. Could you tell us about passnownow.com?
Thank you very much, Jerry. Passnownow.com is an education technology platform in Nigeria, basically designed with the intention of taking technology to underserved families and low-income communities in Nigeria. And it was because at that time I had worked in youth, and education development for about 6 years. Just about 2012 when we founded Passnownow. And I was very concerned about what has now become Boko Haram, because I went to university in the north University of Jos, precisely where I studied law, and a lot of my research while I was studying civil law just showed that there's a strong connection between economic deprivation and a poor education. And at that time, there was very little uptake in terms of technology and internet penetration in Nigeria, but I was very encouraged by the fact that a lot of young people at that time were already using social media to do great things, creating news platforms and all. I didn't have any background in engineering, and I basically just started to do a lot of research and started to hire web developers, web designers, and I put together PassNow now. 2 years later, we were listed on the Global Innovation Exchange as one of the top 10 innovations in education in Africa.
Impressive.
And as of today, PassNow is the most used, most visited education and technology platform in the whole country. On Alexa.com, I think we're rated about 876 in the whole of Nigeria, and just almost about 500,000 users. We've delivered over 2 million lessons to young people. Our analytics show that PassNow is used in about 33 out of all the 36 states of Nigeria. And our service typically focuses on students directly, but because we recognize that teachers and parents play a fundamental role in getting young people to adopt technology, we began to build and create spaces for parents and teachers to be able to use it.
It's interesting that you talked about this, because I was actually going to
Now, it's even interesting to see that teachers in classrooms in places like Umuahia in the east, or even a teacher like Father Beth Israel, who teaches in a very local village like Igumale in Benue State of Nigeria, use PassNow now to teach in their classrooms. Now, the reason why PassNow is very useful is because textbooks are very expensive. It's also because a lot of the teachers do not have access to the material that they need, the instructional material that provides the content they need to teach in class. Now, so PassNow now is curriculum-based. It houses all of based on Nigeria's approved curriculum from the entire high school curriculum is online, real time, which means that we even have poor children whose parents cannot afford to put them in school. One of the most touching stories for me was a little boy somewhere in Ebonyi State who had said that he'd written WAEC, which is the entry-level exam into university, 3 times, and could not pass. So his parents couldn't afford to buy another WAEC form and take him through another lesson period. And he used PassNow now to prepare from scratch, reading the notes online, using the exam past questions to prepare, and he went on to write the exam.
So you see, we will come to the issue of, the challenges. I'm sure that, internet penetration, which you said has significantly improved.
And the cost of data.
The cost of data, we'll come to this in a moment. Elvis, as a software engineer, I read your story, and his story is actually on, the document that we have in preparation for this panel. You faced a number of challenges while you were in Nigeria as a software engineer. You created getprepup.com. But could you tell us, how would you describe the current state of EdTech learning, as a software engineer that has gone through, that's faced challenges with, she talked about assembling, software engineers, for instance. All that she had was vision, right?
Graphic designers.
But you were an engineer, Tell us.
So I worked on PrepUp while I was in high school, which back then, there was no easy way for people to prepare for these exams that they're supposed to write before they go to university. So I had that need, and I built PrepUp, which was to help students better prepare for these exams. And so far, it has helped over 150,000 people across West Africa to prepare for the exams. And while working on that, one thing I realized, there are 2 major barriers to online education in West Africa, and I think this constraint is not, I wouldn't say unique, it's shared across other African countries too. It might vary based on country, but there are 2. I realized there are 2 major problems. One is the cost of internet, and secondly is reliability. We have a good chunk of people in that demographic, greater than 13 and less than 24, that can't afford to get like internet and also can get like an affordable internet connection. So like while working on that, I realized if I want to make like a big impact in the EdTech space in Africa, which I'm very passionate about, that I need to like face this big problem. And that was when I joined an MIT-based startup called Dotline, which was actually taking this problem head on. And
you joined this group while you were in Nigeria?
While I was in Nigeria, yeah. So we had like a Nigerian office, and like it was New York and Nigeria. Like they had operations in New York, but based in Nigeria.
Are you saying that this gave you support, so to speak?
Yeah, so they were already working on this problem, and like I already had this problem while working on my own project, and I said, okay, this makes sense. Let me bring my what I already know about the Nigerian market over there, and so like we started working on a technology which we call video vectorization. So like you can represent videos in different formats. Rather than having pixel by pixels, you have like text instruction describing what is going to be at particular positions on the screen, and then you have kind of like a script that animates that object from one place to another, and you can get a video from that. And if you represent a video in that format, you get like 98% less size than the original video file size. So like this was something I was working on at Dotland, which was like making the size of video smaller.
Smaller,
and
it
also,
will mean the cost also will go down.
Yeah, that will also drive the cost down, as well as because in Nigeria, for example, there's like a big offline distribution channel where like people have like this peer-to-peer sharing apps where they share content with their friends. So this will enable them to also easily share, like for example, with the vectorized video, you can have like over an hour of video for just less than 1 megabyte. So like this enables people to like have access to this video content and educational content without spending so much money. Yeah. So like it was kind of a technical challenge we are really passionate about.
But there were solutions to it.
Yeah, so we solved that, and currently we are being used by a few EdTech companies in Nigeria. I think right now, like one of the biggest EdTech, test prep apps in Nigeria called Pass.ng uses the technology to like provide video lessons to like hundreds of thousands of students that use their app. Yeah.
Interesting. Brian, we will agree that there are many stakeholders when it comes to, education and especially even EdTech, and to facilitate better learning, So, but as an experienced administrator, what would you say has led to some of this, record progress that you've made from 2009 to 2018, which you pointed out? And what should be the role of government for EdTech on the continent? The role of government for EdTech?
Oh, great question. I mean, look at these guys. Are you guys the norm in Africa, or are you the exception in Africa? And why I ask that question? Because if we stick with this slide, we're always going to have the guys that have great success and the majority that don't. And therefore, in my view, there is a solution to leapfrogging that inequality. And you guys have started doing that. What governments must do, in my view, is to start to aid and support this kind of development, but more importantly, create an enabling environment which will allow it to get to all kids, particularly the poor in Africa, and not just those that can afford or those that have. And so we believe that there are two things that we can do to actually help leapfrog inequality. We know in the Western Cape that our kids have ability, but we also know that the trauma is causing them not to be able to learn. And so people think that they're dumb, they can't learn. It's not true at all, because of our poorest kids rise to the top. We've had one of the kids from the poorest communities, number 3 in the country. We've had, it's absolutely possible. Now, there are two things that we believe government should be doing. The one is EdTech, e-learning. We call it e-learning in our province. And creating the enabling environment to do that. The enabling environment is not necessarily to just give apps or just give cell phones or smartphones or tablets. It's creating an infrastructure, a technology infrastructure. And so I'll share with you very briefly what we've done. And the second one is transforming the mindsets of people, and particularly learners, so that they have a growth mindset that makes them believe and understand they can. And the growth mindset amongst teachers, so that they don't think the kids are dumb because they're poor, they can't learn. We believe that's got to change. If that doesn't change, we're not going to move. And so we've done the following in the Western Cape, which we think are good examples. We've already got wide area networks in almost all our high schools. We have more than 412, or a third of our schools, with Wi-Fi networks covering those schools. We have 28,000 tablets in only 16 model schools where we're experimenting with these issues. We have 23,000 PCs in labs accessible to learners with Wi-Fi, so connectivity is free of charge for them any time of the day or whenever access is able to be had. And we've got more than 7,500 smart classrooms, digital classrooms that teachers can utilize to do some learning. We've got 3 types of schools. Model schools where we experiment, 16 of them. Enhanced schools where we are slowly rolling out Wi-Fi in all those schools and also localized. So in any class, a kid with a device can access free of charge at that space, whatever the digital resources are available. And we have universal schools so that every child in our province is touched, either in a Wi-Fi lab with access and also for teachers, so that teachers can access those issues. But that alone is not going to change it. And so the mistake I think we often make is that we think EdTech alone is going to change. And so a lot of the philanthropists throw money at it by saying, give a child a device and it'll change the world. It will change for some kids, but you've got to change their mindsets and understanding what they can do. And so the second thing that we believe is a strategy that we do 3 things. First of all, teachers have to have an understanding that the teacher needs to enter to serve but continue to learn. It's just catching phrases that enable things that can, if you like, be catchphrases, but that have a common message. For values, which is a central pillar, we have to have values that support what's happening. And then the learner, quite critically, enter to learn and leave to serve is the international mantra that I saw in Singapore. It's starting to create a mindset for both teachers and learners. And there are 4 things that we do in this strategy. And that's the end of what I want to say. We have to develop leadership at all levels. Because if you don't have leadership and you don't have common understanding and common vision, then all of these efforts are piecemeal efforts. We have to ensure that values is in all our schools and a key strategy so that we change the way people think. We've got a growth mindset that will touch every one of our 1.1 million kids in the next 5 years. Across the entire province, not the nation yet, Western Cape province. Okay. Every single one, because our kids have to understand that there's an opportunity for them and that there is a future and that they don't have to live in depression without any hope. And then they will learn automatically. We've run trials. In 1 year, 3 45-minute access to a growth mindset program for kids has moved the mathematics performance in grade 9 up by 4.6% without changing the maths teaching in trial schools. Amazing. It will make a difference. And then our teachers' mindset, touching all teachers, we believe is the secondary.
Do you think this could be a model that could be extended very much to other areas in South Africa?
Well, the answer is yes. But the DG sitting there, the DG of the National Department of Education, some of our principals are sitting here, some of our officials, yes, but. The but is they have to believe that we're on the right track. The second but is that we have to have political synergy and buy-in. The third but is that we have to show that it works over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. And then we will only have real success, in my view, across Africa if we understand and we work together with a unified approach and a unified outcome. Otherwise, we will be doing pockets of work all over the space. And your great work, in my view, will then get lost. It'll be pockets of excellence instead of leapfrogging, particularly the poor, across the continent.
Okay, so unified approach to get unified outcomes. Toyosi, you know about the situation in Nigeria. 7% of the budget in 2018 was dedicated to education. And I mean, for such a long time, education is amongst the sectors where that gets the least funding in Nigeria, amongst. There's been some improvement, but then this surely is not enough. And even at that, we do know that when you say you allocate funding for education, are we factoring in EdTech, education technology, in a way as to, drive growth and achieve better outcomes? But there are those who say or who think that private venture capitalists, private funding could be the solution to this, and not just government. What do you make of this?
First, I don't even want to bother about the budget of Nigeria to education, because I think we will probably not live here if we started to have that conversation. When a government puts 6% to, one of the simple ways you can quickly measure the commitment of Nigerian leaders to education is to look around and see that you've got countries like Liberia, South Africa, Kenya, Ghana,
Rwanda.
are all here. I've not seen anybody from the Ministry of Education in Nigeria. They're not even talking about it. So that's a measure of what their priority would be. You see, the political will on the part of government is fundamental to ensuring that policies that transform the lives of people are institutionalized in a system that is dependent on institutions and not individuals. And when you talk about education technology and venture capitalist funding, I just said it in the session earlier, that how do we, I'm at a loss as to how government allows for private sector investments into education without compromising, and ceding so much power to the private sector. Because what you find is a lot of, in Nigeria, in Lagos State where I live, Lagos is the most populous city in Africa. And Lagos has over 6,000 secondary schools. Only about 20% of them are public schools. The rest of them are private schools that are highly priced. And so when you discuss issues of inclusivity, inclusion, and diversity, you find that a ton of children are completely left out along the educational value chain. There's no way they can afford the quality of education that is ever going to make them competitive. So in discussing funding for EdTech and whether venture capitalists would, what I want to see is a fundamental connection between the academia and the industry. Because, you can discuss primary, secondary education, but, the education that really gives you access to the kind of decent work that the United Nations has set out as part of the SDGs is tertiary education, or at least secondary education that gives you the kind of skill, like work readiness skills that you require. Now, the education that an average young person in Nigeria does get within the four walls of a classroom does not in any way build their capacity to be able to take on those sort of jobs. Where does education technology play a key role? You need research and development. You need to begin to invest more in science and technology courses. You need a sustained, reward system for our teachers. In Nigeria, teachers earn, peanuts. We don't even pay much attention. 2 different states in Nigeria have tried to pilot the EdTech program. Osun State did Okmoimo and invested over 3 billion naira and gave, tablets to children and told the teachers that and even the children couldn't even access the internet, right? Now, the project failed. Ekiti State brought Samsung to build a Samsung Engineering Academy in Ekiti State and gave laptops to children and insisted that teachers had to buy it. The governor lost his election a few months after because the teachers felt left out of the process. What happens is that you give technology to children, and then you turn your back as a government and go home. And the teachers tell the children that they can never bring those laptops to class. What you need is a bottom-to-top approach where teachers and students are co-workers, are co-drivers of the EdTech system, such that nobody feels left behind. A lot of teachers use Personal now, for example. And part of the reasons why...
I was wondering how you were able to achieve this. I mean, having a situation a scenario where teachers and students were able to embrace...
In fact, we have a forum where teachers and students go to chat about issues, and now we're extending it to video lessons, such that at the end...
Do you have incentives like that made them to embrace this? What was the approach? What was it?
It's very low cost. In fact, Personal now, as of 2012 when we launched, was a free platform. But we realized that running it free with the amount of bandwidth that the site was consuming, the kind of hosting, dedicated servers that we needed to be able to make sure that the runtime on the site was really fast, there was no way we could sustain it and tell you what, private sector only invest in things that they see return on revenue, return on investment. Now, the problem with that is you cannot completely commercialize education. Because education is supposed to be social impact. Exactly. The entire development of a country is dependent on the fundamental foundation of the quality of education you give to your people.
Absolutely.
Now, the I consider the Personal now in a country like Nigeria, is doing the teachers and the students a favor. Yeah. So from our own part, we're not concerned about giving incentives to them because in the first place, they can't, if they do not use our platform, they can't even afford those textbooks. Schools are not even, you give 50 computers to a school of 700 children. You have a secondary school class of A to F with 200 children in each of those classes. You teach a computer science, you graduate people from a computer science program from university, and they don't know the difference between hardware and software.
So,
I can bring you in.
I'm not a politician. I'm an educationist.
Yeah.
But I believe that you have to have partnerships. Education and government can't do it alone. That I know for sure. We certainly need investment. We certainly need private sector investment. But if you do those two things in isolation, you're lost. And you said a very true thing in my view. You have to take your teachers and your learners on board, which, as I tried to indicate, was part of what we're trying to do, in an integrated strategy. So I think, but government has to create enabling environments. Enabling environment for investment that's easy and that's not full of red tape and that is able to do those things so that we have a real partnership.
And the problem, and I think that perhaps this for me is the most important panel in this program, because Africa is talking so much about technology and internet and all. And when you think about tech in Africa, you think about e-commerce. You think about Uber, you think about self-driving cars and all those sort of things. Whereas nobody wants to pay much attention to education technology. Like Chida, Elvis just spoke about something that is so crucial. All of these inventions, if you read an article that someone just wrote about why technology is not leapfrogging in new frontier markets. He says that Uber is successful in American and UK British cities, but Uber is failing in Nigeria, Ghana, in African cities. Why? Because there's no collaboration within the system, number one. Number two, there is the quality of innovation that fluctuates in Nigeria and Ghana that is inconsistent compared to those other places. If you use Uber in America, the driver is comfortable with taking his money on a card. In Nigeria or in Ghana, the driver wants cash. So you call an Uber car and it doesn't get to you for the next 15 minutes because he's thinking about collecting the money in cash and he can pay back Uber when he wants. So poverty and mindset plays a crucial role, and the government has a responsibility to demonstrate a level of dedication to education technology such that it's not seen as something that is on the side. It must be at the very epicenter of the priorities of our policymakers on the continent.
I was going to come to you now, but I wanted to also say that yes, indeed, we've seen some of these disparities in terms of how things function out there and how things function here on the continent, but also in a place like Kenya, with remarkable rates or remarkable progress with internet penetration, about 85%, mobile banking, providing solutions to this. I think these are also success stories that can motivate people to take up.
People make money from those areas. Education is for the long term. Yep. You may not make immediate revenue, but that shouldn't take away the commitment that you want to have to the project.
I want to add something to what both of you have already said. Just like you said, opportunity is limited, but talent is not. You can find talented people almost everywhere, but they don't get the opportunity most times that they deserve. And I think, and also there's also a room for the private companies, there's a room for them to do stuff. For example, we could use Andela, which is kind of like an EdTech company, but they use a different model where they train you, and then after they train you for free, and then you get to work for international companies, and you get experience and all that. I think yes, there's lots of stuff the government can do, but I also think there's also there's a room for some innovation from the private sector to in Africa.
And we do have many, just to add, we do have many, people creating so many young innovators on the continent creating apps. So, like you say, it's just the support. They just need to be encouraged.
And an enabling environment.
Indeed. Now, just to say, we're actually run out of time. It's a 30 minutes panel session, but we're going to wrap up really soon now. But then I want us to talk about, if there's one thing really that you'd say you prefer a solution, to driving, revolution, EdTech revolution on the continent, and that can cut across, what would this be? What would this be? I'll start with you, Brian.
Well, in my view,
Excuse me, you have about 2 minutes left because we need to announce the winners at the start of the competition.
Yeah, just so really briefly. Thank you.
so in my view, unleash the kids.
Unleash the kids.
Kids will drag teachers along. Unleash them.
Okay. And Toyosi?
I'd like to see more democratization of data and more technology tools on the continent, where telecoms, educators, and policymakers sit in a room to decide what does work and reduce those costs, make it accessible to everybody.
Okay, and Chidera?
Yeah, access to online education would be like the thing for me, and I think like we should have like more players like addressing like these unique constraints in this market, and I think yeah, if online education is accessible to everyone, like anyone can learn from anywhere, and that's like the selling point of online education. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. I'm just going to just get one question because we're going to finish. One question, any question from anyone? All right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you,